When we first went down to this nursing home and saw Vance and Mary's first time I'd ever seen Mary, and she said then that Sydney was keeping in touch with them, and that she'd called them from New York several times, and I think Pop had been down there. She had an interesting husband. Sydney did. He was a pianist.
Yeah, concert, wasn't
he? And he came. A friend of mine in New York knew him. She lived in Sheridan Square, and these friends lived on McDougal Alley right off of Washington Square. And she said, well, why didn't I go see her when I was up in New York? And I said, well, never occurred to me. First place, I barely knew her.
Yeah.
But Henry, the pianist, had said, come on down to Galena, and he'd play the piano for us. So Vance, Ron and I dashed down there to hear him play the piano. Not only did we not hear him play the piano, we never even saw Henry. I gathered that this was just some bright idea he had had, and Sidney had and decided this was not wise. He had to go over to Lee and Shorts because Fanny didn't have a piano, and he had to go to Lee and Shorts and play on her piano. So I never got to hear him play the piano, but they said he'd play with his nose part of the time. That if he couldn't hit all of the keys with his hands, why he'd hit them with his nose now and then.
You heard the story of the first piano, didn't you, that came into Galena? Did you ever hear that story? Jay Frank told me this, that the Shorts bought a player piano, and it came in on the railroad, and so they took the wagon down and loaded it on. Well, it was a player piano, see. So Uncle Saul Embry, he was all excited. He's the one that always used to bring his fiddle to town, and everything. One of the best fiddlers, I don't know if he's the best, but he's one of the most popular fiddlers there. And so they said they put it up on the wagon, uncrated and everything, got it all worked up, and sat Charlie Short down there and put that player roll on. Well, they started off, and they took off from the train station, and here came Uncle Saul. Well, my gosh, he didn't know Charlie Short could play the piano. And he went up ahead of him, telling everybody to come out and look at Charlie play that piano. And they said they went around the square, and old Charlie was just sitting up there mocking, and said, Uncle. So then they got it to the house, and they got done loaded.
Well, you could fix it so the keys wouldn't play.
Well, I don't know how, but
I doubt if Uncle Saul. The keys did go down.
But when they got there, they had to get Uncle Saul out of the room so they could change rolls on it, because he'd been playing the same tune, all the way. I thought that was a cute story,
that's
though.
Pretty good.
But go ahead then. I would just, when you mentioned piano, that made me think of that, and I didn't.
And the first time I ever saw her, Vance was that was at the time that you were talking about when they had the folklore convention, the Old American Legion Hall. And Vance had colitis in those days, and he'd have these periods, and he'd be quite sick.
Yeah.
But this time, he had the job with that folklore business at Missouri Guide.
Yeah.
And that, this woman from South Carolina, what was her name? I can't remember it now, but anyway, she had gotten him a job as a kind of a superintendent, although he apparently never set foot in the office. And we didn't know work whatsoever as far as I'm concerned. But he went into it because he was hard up and he needed the money, and also he intended to latch on to all of the material that they collected and keep it.
Yeah.
And so, but he got the colitis, and he went to the old Ozarks Hotel, which was the place where he always
Where was that?
Anyway, it was on Jefferson someplace, and it's been gone for a long time. They had a very good restaurant there. Best food in town, I thought.
I think I've seen pictures of it. I think there was one corner of Commercial and
Helen Louise Graves
Robertson or something like that, wasn't it? Or was it Benton?
It was close to Benton.
Somewhere there was a picture.
It was on the north side of it.
Oh, no, this isn't the one I'm thinking of then.
It was a good hotel.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It was really better than the Colonial. As I say, they had a good chef there, and very good meals. Of course, Vance couldn't eat hardly enough, but that's all I got out of the whole deal were my meals. I had lunch on the state really every day, but he was growing and took on, and when Vance was sick, and he hollered. And I had to go down every morning and buy him a little bottle of some kind of a laxative, and I had to see to it that he had this chloroform. And it worried me like the dickens, and I thought, well, if anything happens, I'm going to find myself in the suit up to here. And every night I think, well, if he isn't better tomorrow, I'm going to call his mother, or write his mother in Pittsburgh and tell her that I don't want to take the responsibility of this. But one day I went down there, and he said, have you called and written my mother? And I said, no. Not bothered to say I was planning to if he didn't get back. But he'd gotten a phone call from her saying, or a telegram or something saying, did she want him to come? And he said, I said, well, all I've done is you've told me every day to write her a letter and write Mary, his wife, a letter down Pineville. He said, every day? And I said, yes, and you'd sign them and I'd mail them. And he said, well, I've never written her but once a week. I said, well, I didn't know that. And so that was what had come. But then he continued to stay there. But one morning before I went down there, why the phone rang, and Vance never talked on the telephone.
I know.
Never.
That, yeah.
But this time he did. And he said, you don't need to come down today. And I said, oh, good, you're better. Yes, he said, Cindy Robertson, folklorist, ballad collector, was there. And so he had brought him a bottle of scotch. Here was a man who was practically dying, so he said, of colitis.
Yeah.
And so he'd had several swigs of this scotch, and it was up singing in the recorder of all sorts of ballads, and he wanted to bring her out to meet me, and I said, okay, bring her out. So he brought her out, and I talk about.
Where were you living? Around in here then, or where'd you live then?
Right down
That's
here.
what I thought. You lived. Yeah, that's
right
where you've always
down
lived over in this part, haven't you? Yeah, that's right.
So
yeah.
he brought her out, and I met Cindy, and she seemed to be very nice,
yeah,
and I think I met her a couple more times. And they had this deal cooked up, and she got him a job of recording things for the Library of Congress somewhere, which was a good thing because he got fired from the state thing right away because that was the biggest mess that ever was. And then they continued to correspond and so on. And I think she went down to Galena to see him several times, and then she went down to Fayetteville.
Yeah, she mentions in that letter now about Emma Dusenberry and I've forgotten some others. You can I'll just leave that with you.
Oh,
You can read it later. Just keep that whole folder together in that way, and then I'll get it from you later on. Now I sent this guy a copy of that letter. The reason I'm doing this is with all this other stuff I got to do, but I did talk him into it. And just like I talked my cousin into doing this other one, and I feel a little obligated to help him out a little bit because that won't be too bad on the 1934 Folk Festival because Lucille Morris Upton, I went out to see her yesterday.
Oh, how is she?
All right. She gave me, 5 years ago or so, her scrapbook that had that's when I first knew about this 34 Folk Festival, and she let me copy all that. So I've got a little booklet I've ring bound that's full of the newspaper articles. And at that time we talked a little bit, but I didn't realize I was going to be into it like I am now because of this meeting. So I went out yesterday just to see, because some people will say, well, she may be okay and she may not. Well, she looked good, and of course she thinks she's almost 100, and she's not. She's out at Primrose, yeah. And she was very alert acting, and I think she probably remembered who I was by the time I left, but she would, but I could tell she was being accommodated. She really wasn't remembering any of that. And I said, remember we talked about this? Yeah, I think so, but I could tell she really wasn't, but she was, in fact, it'd be, if you're out that way sometime, you might stop in and say hello to her. You knew her, didn't you?
Oh, yeah.
Know her, yeah.
Yeah, I said
but she doesn't really,
she was in the nursing home.
She doesn't really remember. I mean, I think she vaguely knew who I was.
Lucille the best of all the people.
Oh yeah, she was.
Docia Carroll was nice, but a little high hat.
But
Lucille was just
Lucille was just infuriated with Vance because she did that article in the paper with all this ballad stuff, and Vance said, well, could I use some of that? She said, well, all right, but she said, don't you put any names to it because I really shouldn't be letting you use these things. These things were sent to me. Well, when it came out in there, they're supplied by Lucille Morris Upton from so-and-so. And she said she had a fit over that. She was really kind of mad still a few years ago when I talked to her about that. But he had me, after John T. Woodruff just laid him low at that banquet they had. Do you remember that now?
I wasn't at
Well, but you know, he got up, and of course the Chamber of Commerce was all upset about this old hillbilly stuff going up to St. Louis. You know, we'd best forget all of that.
They didn't know that there was money in it.
Well, now they do. In fact, in that review, you know, I put in there that now they give an honorary hillbilly award. But Vance always remembered that Lucille was there that night, and the next day her article took up for him. So he had me. He wrote a little inscription, remembering how good she was to him or something like that, and then I took it and pasted it in one of those first bibliographies and gave it to her here a few years ago, you know. But no, she was really, I enjoyed talking. I wish I'd have written down more than I did.
Well, he and I went over this year. I had a copy of her ball number book.
Yeah.
And she helped, and Vance helped her get it published.
Oh, uh-huh.
And but this Caldwell outfit out there was later on burned up. But and so we went over there and she autographed it. She was married by that time to what was his name? Gene
Morris.
No, Morris.
Oh, Upton.
Gene Upton.
Upton.
Yeah, he was a court reporter.
Yeah.
And she covered the courthouse. That was her run. But she was a crackerjack reporter.
Oh, I think so, yeah.
And a very, very nice person. And I don't know if O'Brien was all worked up because he said she didn't have any pension.
Never got anything from him. Isn't that
But
something?
she must be out there on Medicaid then.
I guess. I don't know. And last I heard, he had, you know, they were going to try and get something going. Well, about that time is when she really got sick, you know. And that
because out there it's around $1,200 to $1,300 a month.
Yeah.
And Social Security won't pay for nursing home.
Yeah.
But Medicaid will.
Yeah.
And so she's probably on Medicaid. And they are saying she's allowed her house there. And I don't know, she had some relatives, but I don't know.
Well, she's got a niece that, they had a couple of months ago, Elizabeth McCann called me and said, Lucille's birthday's coming up. She's going to be 90 or 92 or something like that, or 93 or 94. And her niece, isn't that Susan Croyce Kelly? Isn't that her niece that wrote here on the newspaper?
I never knew any of her family.
I think it is.
She came in and brought flowers on Mother's Day, and it always tickled me because she's for the monument. And she gave her that Ozark in pronunciation instead of saying for the tombstone, for the monument.
But, and then there's another relative somewhere else.
Greenville.
Greenville, Missouri, yeah. We're going to have this party for her. Well, everybody got out there. Well, the only ones that showed up were Art and Margaret Galbraith and Kitty Lipscomb and Elizabeth McCain and somebody, and there was nothing set up. There was nothing, anything. All these things that were supposed to have been done. Nobody ever called them to tell them to do it and all that. So it was really, of course, Lucille didn't know the difference. But they said it was really a fiasco, and they said it had been better off if they never said they were going to do anything because they really didn't.
But she probably didn't remember.
No, that's what I mean. It didn't make any difference. She doesn't remember that.
And if you're 94, well, you're too weak to enjoy these things anyway. I remember when my mother was out at Fremont Manor. Why, I didn't know anything about it, but they had nominated her for one of those Sweethearts of the Day so on, and she was sick as a dog with the flu, and here came corsages and and free tickets for free meals and flowers, and I thought, well, what's all this? I went out and there was signs saying she had them call and say for me not to come out if she had the flu, and I went out anyway to see how she was getting along. And so all this stuff was in her room, and I said. Asked the nurses, I said, what is this? And they had nominated her for whatever that was, for it was her birthday. And there she was, sick in bed. She didn't know anything was going on because she had a fever and she knew somebody brought her a corsage. But so what? She'd seen corsages before.
Well, did you ever? That's all you really saw of that Sidney Robertson then? Was that you didn't go with them when they did any collecting or anything?
No, I didn't go with them when they did any collecting. I saw her here, and then I saw her down at Galena.
Yeah.
And she came down there, and they went around. I always thought she was a little smitten with Vance.
Well, well, what I wonder is like some of these that come in from the outside. If she hadn't been with him, I don't think she'd have probably gotten too far from me talking to her on the phone because she's too, let's say well-educated by that. I mean, Eastern standards, and kind of was in the hinterlands here and everything.
Oh, well, of course, Vance went to Clark University.
Yeah, but he had been her own. He knew how to deal with the people down there
Yeah.
pretty well. Whereas I think if she hadn't been with him, probably she wouldn't have. But but she was working for the Library of Congress then. That's
Yeah.
what she was doing. Yeah. Well, what'd you do when you went down? You said you covered one of these 1934 tryouts and everything.
Well,
what do you remember about any of that?
That was while Vance was sick, and he sent me down there as the American Legion. I didn't know have the slightest idea about anything about ballads, and all I did really was get one of the programs and take back and write down the names of the songs that they sang. And Vance's idea always was that I should be able to just write these things down as they sang them. I couldn't do that. He was always finding somebody someplace who had a ballad, and would I run over I didn't have a car. I had to get somebody to take me over there. And I think it was Weldon King's grandfather had a ballad about Belle Younger. Or Cole Younger.
Cole Younger, yeah.
And so I wrote that down, and there wasn't much light in the place, and I couldn't see it, and it went on and on and on. I copied several of them for him in different places, but not with Sidney. She had the recording machine.
Yeah.
And Vance was just enthralled with what she had. He had had one, I think, at one time. This was much better, and so she let him use this. And but I don't think she went with him too much. I think she left it and went on.
Well, she says in this letter that I left with you that she mentions who, and of course, the Fayetteville she did some, and then the Galena was May Kenny McCord, I think. And then she mentions over in southeast Missouri some woman that I kind of recognize the name. I've seen it you referred to before, but she says in there that she didn't really do a whole lot. I think I haven't read it. But anyway, the way I've got in touch with her was when we went up 2 years ago to St. Louis, and they had the National Council of the Arts meeting of the board members, and it was the nationwide meeting, in other words. And we played as one of the demonstrations of the folk arts, Art and Idea.
Well, this Sarah Gertrude, she was at that thing down at them.
Well, she's the one that put it on.
Yeah, she was the one.
She was the one that put on the St. Louis.
But she put on.
And then she went out around the state and did these too.
She put on one down at American Legion.
Because that's when was it Bradford Lundstrom? What was his name? The little man from North Carolina that came.
Well, Lunsford.
Yeah, Lunsford. Yeah, he came here too.
Well, there was some fiddler who was there, and he was supposed to be the best fiddler in the Ozarks, and he was there.
Yeah, there was.
But I can't remember what.
Well, I've got that. I'll have to bring. I should have brought one over. I think I've got an extra copy of that. Of those newspaper articles. You'd be interested in reading those.
And
it's in a little booklet. I ring bound them. You'd be. I'll bring those over to you and let you read those.
Well, as a matter of fact, did you know that the library has got all of those newspapers on tape? And
I've been going through microfilm. That's what I've been doing.
Microfilm.
That's what I've been doing. Yeah. Oh yeah. There's a.
And the SMS has got them too.
The SMS doesn't. I called out there.
Well, they did.
Oh, wait, Springfield. I called about St. Louis. That's what I called it. Nobody has a St. Louis paper beyond 1965 or something like that.
Well,
I wanted to try and get to St. Louis back then.
Springfield.
Yeah, they had Springfield, but St. Louis they didn't have. But I'm going to go over to, of course, the good thing about SMS is they're open a lot more than the Springfield Library is. But I'm going to let her do a lot of that herself because I got so many things on my chain right now get this meeting going. Now, I hope you come to this meeting. Because there'll be a bunch of stuff there you'd be interested in, really. There's a lot of topics you'd really be interested in going to, I think.
Well, I wrote to Clay Anderson, and I said I had some of these old things like this. Let's see. Who wrote this? This is Otto Raver, 1934.
Oh, yeah.
But then it occurred to me what he wanted to exhibit was not the old things that were put out, but his stuff, the stuff he's got.
Oh, Clay, yeah. Well, let me tell you then, I cleared this with Clay before I did it. Have you been to this ABC bookstore over here?
Yeah, I went over and...
he's got the best selection of Ozarks and Missouri stuff I've seen.
A cousin of mine had said years ago that she'd like to have copies of my books, and I said,
they're not cheap.
They're all out of print, and I don't know where you can get them. So, but when I was over there and found out the Girl Scouts was there, And also the Ozark Anthology,
Yeah.
I wrote Helen and said, I don't know whether you still want those or not. And so she called them and asked to hold them. And so she didn't get over here in time, but she asked if they'd mail them to us. So she bought the Girl Scouts in the Ozarks and the Ozark
Now, his stuff
Anthology.
isn't cheap, but it's not outpriced.
No.
No, his Girl Scouts in the Ozarks was $5 cheaper than I paid for my copy that I bought 2 years ago.
Well, I didn't know how much he charged her for it,
And I bought,
I thought, well,
I think that's where I bought, no, let's see. You remember I bought Camp Meeting Murders somewhere?
you both can't make
Over there, that's where I bought it, yeah, that's right. And it wasn't, what did I pay,
You know,
$15
that
or
thing was
something?
brought out in England, and I don't know what I ever did with the English copy. And it always tickled me to wonder what on earth the English people thought about
Yeah.
it. And a good company that
Yeah.
put it out. Of course, we didn't get hardly any money out of it. And it was also brought out in paperback, and we didn't get hardly any money out of that. Of course, when I look at people getting the $19 and so on for books, and I think, my gosh, in
Oh,
those
well,
days, $2.
fiction's $20 now, which is ridiculous. I don't see anybody could afford to pay that. Just to,
I don't think,
you don't really read those that
think
much.
with
It's
the
not a
few
reference thing, you know.
exceptions that they sell a whale of a lot.
Oh, I tell you,
Because
that
there's
is-
no bookstores.
Yeah. that's
And
right.
if there are bookstores, they don't have any stock.
Yeah.
It's all paperback.
Yeah.
Because
Gotcha.
you go to get a hardcover book someplace or other, and they've got, maybe a new one, maybe
Yeah,
30
yeah.
titles, and then there'll be a shelf with
Yeah.
a few things back.
And
Because
there'd be just rows of the paperbacks. And of course,
And-
paperbacks are $10 now. You know, some of them.
oh yeah, what they
Isn't that
used to be
you
twenty-
know, used to
they
be a
used to
quarter. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah, they used to
Oh,
be
reason I
25.
know why I mentioned this. Flockstra is his name. Jerry Flockstra is the guy that runs this ABC. But he used to be the librarian at Central Bible College.
Well, and he ran this one over here.
He had Viking Flea Market.
You know, the one we tried to sell the old Bibles to.
Yeah.
But he's going to have. I called Clay first, and I said, "Now I got
Well,
an idea
I took
here."
a Tom's Town of by a guy who Bill Vaughn.
Oh yeah.
The Kansas City Star over there, and I traded it in on. I bought a book of Vance's, and I got it. And I thought, well, you know, that looks familiar. I got it home. By gosh, I had it. But I had
Well,
given one to the library because
Yeah.
I had sworn that I had not taken a book out there, and they let me get by with it. And then, by gosh, I found it. So I went in there and I said, I'm crawling on my hands and knees in here, and here's a little token of my respect. And the book I said I didn't have, and I gave them a copy of one of
Yeah.
Vance's books.
I loaned
It was
out
autographed.
sticks in the knapsack I don't have. And he said, well, he could find me one. I said, well, what would it be? And he said, oh, of course, when you say you're interested in something,
Yeah.
naturally, you know, I think he said $25 or $30. And I said, well, I don't know what I want. I said, I may just,
Well, what I wanted was Helen Hot Springs.
yeah.
What is that? Is that some of the dirty books? or-
No, it was published in Fort Smith.
Well, he
And,
never sent me that, and I don't know why.
What did he want for them, or did he have them? Helen Hot Springs.
I mean, Vance never sent it.
Oh, well, that
I
was
never bought any
that was
Vance's
done.
books.
All it is they're not even they're not bawdy that much. I mean, they're not like Fishing in the Snow at all. But they were done 70s sometime,
Well,
early 70s.
usually, he sent me
Yeah.
his books. I never.
But he
bought
didn't
them.
do this though. I mean, who did that? Helen Hot Springs, or what was it? Helen Hot
But,
Springs.
yeah,
Hot Springs
and
and
Helen.
Hell, yeah.
Hot Springs and
Yeah, I know that Old Shepherd's bookstore. Listen, I stopped in there not long ago, down to by Silver Dollar City, and in the Missouri section, I bought a couple of Homer Croys for like $5 a piece,
Oh,
which
of
wasn't
course,
bad.
North Missouri.
I know it, but I mean, well, Missouri, though I still buy a lot of
Yeah.
Missouri stuff too. And also, I bought Gwatley's Yellow-Headed Summer for $5. That was the guy that wrote it down here in Arkansas. He was an admirer of Vance. He was at Vance's funeral, in fact.
Oh,
Gwatley, I've forgotten what his first name was. And he's since died. He taught down at some college at Fort Smith. He was an English teacher down there. But anyway, I asked Clay, I said, no, I'd like to have this guy bring some of his books. I said, not to help him, but to bring it down there, because a lot of these people never have any chance to even see it.
that's why he said, well, I want to get around and see some people. And I had never met any other writers and so on. And so he'd send me their books, and I'd take them down, and I've got an autographed Charlie Finger book.
Mhm. He
And-
gave me one of Fingers, too.
And then he sent me some George Melbourne's, and he brought George.
He gave me Melbourne's Oh, see, I can't. What was the one he wrote? Yeah, the what?
Well,
Yeah, I have that.
Hornbook.
But what's the fiction he wrote about Oklahoma?
Well, he wrote 3. There's a catalog.
Nope.
And then there's I've got 2 of them.
Ah, the one he was the most.
There was the one
See, now
the
mine's.
first one the advance let me read it, but I didn't get to keep it. And let's see.
Something town, doesn't it? Something? Something town or?
Oklahoma Town.
Yeah, okay. I've got the English version, and then Vance gave me a German version of it.
Well,
Right, for heaven's sake. Yeah, I've got both of them.
Yeah, so I've got, and what's Finger's work that was well known? Say it.
Ozark Fantasia.
Yes, I've got that. I've got that. He gave me that too.
That's autographed. And
Yeah.
And George was the one who showed me about this business, you know.
Yeah.
Sending him for, see that says review copy.
Yeah.
And George was a nice guy. Those things are worth money now.
Oh
I
yeah.
understand.
Oh yeah. Well, he's going to bring a bunch, and I said now. I cleared it with SFO too that he could sell. He doesn't want to take orders because he wants to sell them right there. And I understand that. He said, well, he said, how much are you going to charge for the table? And I said, we're not going to charge anything. He said, well, I'll tell you what I'll do. He said, I'll give a donation to the society. And I said, that'll be fine. But he's got the best selection I've seen of out of print Flockstra. This ABC books over here. He's got the best selection I've seen in this part of the country.
I never cared too much for Marjorie,
Marge Lyon. He's got a ton of her stuff. Yeah.
I've got one of hers, or did I?
I've got 3 of hers. I've got 3 of hers.
I think I had.
You know, she talks about the judge this and the judge that, and I knew some people over around Mountain View, Missouri, that said the judge had a reputation for kind of taking a few people too, if he could, over in there. Said he took advantage of a lot of people in his.
Down in Eureka Springs got mad, or
Yeah.
Lewis did, because she wrote for the Chicago papers, and
Yeah.
she wrote this deal about be a king in Arkansas for $100.
Yeah.
And you could buy a lot of land, but you couldn't make a living on it.
No.
And Lewis said people would come down and they'd buy the land, and that would be all of their savings. This was during the Depression, and the land wasn't in cultivation, and there wasn't any house on it or anything. And
Listen,
so
30 years ago, when Bull Shoals first came in, my first lake fishing was over around Osig, you know, over towards Gainesville. And when we drove, one time we were driving into this place called Nolan's Point. We went just past the new Osig, they call it, which was up on the highway. Yeah. And as we drove down to this Nolan's Point, there was a whole lot of this scrub land around, and the guy was with us said, well, you want any of this? He said, it's government land. He said, you can buy it for $5 an acre. I said, well, why would you buy $5? You know, now I think, anything. Why didn't we? Why were we out buying this stuff?
Yeah.
Even when it was $100 an acre.
My horseback tip down there, you could get it for 10 cents an acre.
Gosh.
For taxes. People had
Yeah,
to go
yeah.
for taxes. And there was a relative of Daniel Boone was running the newspaper there, and I walked in there, and there was a big big basket of turnips, and I looked at it, and he said, I take everything. I hardly ever get any cash for subscription.
Have you got your Mountaineer yet?
Yeah.
Okay, Clay gave us a good article in there about that. I haven't read your article. I just got it yesterday. I haven't read it yet.
Well, you know, the peculiar thing, I had written this one some time ago, and it's got one whole paragraph in it that was in the last one about the Nance liniment. Because I thought at the time, well, I think I've written this before, but I don't do all this running around and researching some of the rest of it there. And now that Clay is writing, why, that takes up a good deal more space. I've got a stack of stuff down there. But when I'm in the mood, I thought one time I was getting writer's block, and then I started taking photographs, and every time I'd see anything interesting, I think, well, I'll get a few photographs of this and write briefs about it.
Well, as soon as I get this meeting over with, I've got to get back and get my stuff straightened out. And I went out to SMS today. I went to a conference on Southern traditional music at the University of North Carolina back in April. And just when I'm on, I bet you I was the only one there that paid his own way, because it was all teachers and people like that, you know. And I thought, well, I bet I'm the only one that paid my own. But anyway, there was really some interesting stuff there, and a lot of good music from that part of the country, and so I taped lots of stuff. And I went out last night. I sat down and excerpted some stuff out of those tapes from the evening show that I went to. And this Mike Smith has on KSMU has a good program on Saturday nights. That's traditional music and folk. Well, not ballad singing, but old time string band and that kind of stuff. And he has a pretty good following, and he presents it well, I think. And so what we're going to do is, to give me a chance to talk about this meeting coming up, also I excerpted some stuff from this tape, and then we're going to, in the next week or so, I'm going to tape an time with him and interviewing me about the conference, because it was one thing I'm going to talk about briefly, because you don't want to bore people too, was there was a session on archives, on collections, and they had two big collectors. I mean the kind of guys that have 15,000 78s and this kind of stuff, And then they had they didn't have library congress, but they had a bunch of university people from different universities that are into the folk music stuff and everything. And then they had this one girl, black girl, real nice person, Sarah something from the University of Indiana, who's their archivist. And what surprised me about it, they were talking about what to do with your collections. What are you going to do with the collections? And all these people said, don't give them to an archive. Do not, because you'll get buried and you'll never see them again. They said the thing we want you to do
that same thing happens about errors.
Is to go ahead and sell them, have an auction, let other collectors buy it, so it'll stay in circulation. And of course, I've always kind of thought that too.
Colleges and museums are always wanting stuff, and then it just disappears.
Of course, this poor girl was the last speaker, and she had to rebut all of this. And of course, she understood. And the thing is, they get so bogged down with red tape, and also strings attached, where somebody gives it, and it's only to be used by so-and-so department members or something like that. But that is the truth.
And there's no money, of course.
Bob Kenny had quite a collection. Used to be.
I don't know if
I didn't know where you.
I think he may have. I never did hear about his own collection. Of course, most of what he worked from was KTTS's stuff.
Yeah.
But undoubtedly he has. And I'll tell you another one. Wayne Glenn, of course, has a tremendous collection. Wayne's got so much you can't even handle it anymore.
Yeah, I bet.
And then there's this fellow down here, this Dale Reed. Do you ever listen to Monad on Saturday morning?
No, I never did.
For dialect, you ought to listen to it. You ought to listen to it because, I mean, his English is really, it's all its own down there. And by doggies, everything's by doggies. But he has a good program, and it's all music of the early 30s on up into the 50s. He doesn't get any of the country rock on. Now, he'll have Barefoot Bob goes a lot into Texas-style stuff, Bob Wills stuff. He doesn't go too much into that. But that's so scarce anymore, it's hard to find programs you can even listen to. Like we grew up with, which was KWTO, which is all we ever knew, for a lot of years. And
all this stuff they have now.
It's rock and roll. That's all these bands are rock and roll bands that put blue jeans on. And if you see them on TV, they'll hop around the stage just like those rock bands do.
Well,
Same
they can't
thing.
sing.
Oh, and it's this dumb stuff. I mean, it's just.
I remember down.
You know what gets me is these kids anymore. These cars drive up beside you and they've got that radio blaring wide open. I don't know how in the world it's.
There was a guy who went up when I went by KSMU today to take that tape I'd excerpted for this guy to listen to and kind of work out his program. As I walked up there, that's that old stucco house on National there, just across from University Heights is our station. I heard this roar of music, and it was a convertible with the top down, and I thought, I always wonder, how could you ever hear an emergency vehicle? How would you ever know if a fire truck was coming or anything? I don't think they can hear.
Well,
really.
they'll go deaf in a short.
Oh yeah, but they blast it out.
Well, I've got to feed my poochies.
Yes, listen, I'm going to have to go here in a minute.
You don't
anyway.
need to rush off. I'll be back in about 5 minutes.
But I want you to come to this. If you can, really. If you,
well,
I don't know if your dog. Let me tell you some of the ones I know you'd be interested in. One thing you'd be interested in is that one with Wayne Glenn and Cy Simon and Johnny Mullins on KWTO and the Ozark Jubilee, because you've lived here all your life, so you were in on that. And then another one would be this 1934 Folk Festival, and the one on Robertson and Sidney Robertson and Vance. And those two will be on Friday morning's the only thing, and they'll both be at the one right after the other. And another one you'd be interested in is this Laurel Wilson from the University of Missouri on the preservation of quilts and coverlets and that kind of stuff. I think that'll draw a big crowd.
I've got plenty of preservation quilts going on right here.
Yeah, But another one I know you like is this one on Ozarks Women.
My grandmother did, and I've got a quilt to the church where my grandmother was a teacher, and I've got a coverlet that his great-grandmother wove.
Yeah.
We've got so many fancy quilts that they're not fancy.
But this is on the preservation. But the other thing, though, is I think I've told you all this anyway, but I'm so tired of the only Ozarks woman they ever talk about is Rose O'Neal. Well, Rose O'Neal lived in the Ozarks, but she never, to me, was typical of an Ozarks woman.
Well, they have so many lines about it.
Yeah, and so I've got this one.
Well, you know that statue they've got down to Shepherd's Hill, that Rose didn't do it, Callista did it.
Yeah.
And Callista was so proud of it, too. And then this story is going around now that Paul O'Neal was the inspiration for the Kewpies. That's her mother. It's her mother's smile, and then it came to her in a dream. Paul's trying to make a lot of money out of it. He brought in all those pictures. And what's happened to a lot of that stuff anyway?
I don't know how much
is it.
He's got most of it, doesn't he? Doesn't he have it?
Well, there was a lot down at the museum, and Nancy and I went down there to see Vance's pictures. Although there were,
many. I thought there'd be a bigger display, didn't you?
I did too.
Listen, over in the sometime go over the. In fact, I'd like to go with you sometime to the library. In their Missouri room, there's a file over here that the drawers are this deep, and those are Vance's photographs, gobs of them.
At what library is that?
At School of the Ozarks.
Well, they sure didn't have them.
No, I went in there and I thought, well, there'll be a wall, like this. I thought there'd be, and there's two little things there, and that's all there is.
On each side.
Yeah, and that's it. That's all there was. And I thought they'd have a lot more extensive.
I've seen most of those.
Yeah,
and books and so on.
Well, sometime after I get this off my back and get things calmed down, I want let's go down there and go through those pictures. And what I'd like to do is, you'll recognize a lot of things in them, is take this, or my other one, and let's go picture by picture and identify a lot of that stuff. Because I tell you, one of the days coming, there's not going to be anybody around to identify these things, and they're going to get just thrown away.
It's amazing how nowadays...
Well, those ones that they had on display? The girl that's in charge of that is Janelle Duesenberg, is a good friend of mine. She's helping with this meeting and everything. I didn't say anything to her, but I thought, gosh, you could have had a ton of stuff of his that would have been, interesting. But they didn't know what half the stuff was. And it was some of these things. I said, well...
Well, that picture of that gal with the dogwood, that was Vance's masterpiece. He greatly admired that. He had no Graflex. And he was no photographer. But he thought he was. And I don't know how many times I've had that looked at and tried to dredge up something to say about.
I tell you. But we'll go down there. But now I'd like you'd be interested. All right, that one is going to. So I had these three. One is going to be on. Ellen Massey is going to talk about Mary Elizabeth Mankey.
The thing is,
did you ever meet? Did you know
her? From home.
What?
The thing is, I can't sleep away from home. I can't sleep.
Well, no, these are during the day. Yeah. Let me see if I can find somebody you might know that's going down. That's just a 45-minute drive from here.
Yeah, I know. I hadn't occurred to me I could go down there.
Oh yeah, because it's not that bad a drive now. And well, I tell you, we're going to have a big meeting. I think 50 rooms are already gone. That's more than they've ever had. And there's going to be a last-minute rush. I bet there'll be 75 rooms taken. So I bet we have 200 people. Now, you've never met Ellen Massey, have you? Bittersweet, Lebanon, Missouri.
No, I've heard.
I'd like for you to meet her. Boy, she's the one that has written the book on Mary Elizabeth Mankey.
Did you ever hear Susie Reed's music?
Who?
Susie Reed.
I don't know her. I don't think. Do I?
Well, she was a New Yorker, and her father was in the theater business, and she sang old ballads. And when I was in New York during the war, I stayed with some friends of mine down in Greenwich Village on McDougal Alley. And they gave me a party, and they invited Susie, and she had an Irish harp, and she played the beautiful music. And she was in love with one of my hosts. There were two men who stayed in. They bought me a cot, and I stayed. One was in the Army, and the other was a furniture designer. And they were old friends of mine. Truett stayed with us because while he was waiting for the mural money to come in for a mural in St. Louis.
Uh-huh.
And so... But she sang the old English ballads. Yeah. And True said she was really the darling of the Tennessee people and so on. And then she got to be popular. She was in Life, but she was singing in nightclubs. And when Truman came to up here to Bolivar, why, they brought Susie out from New York to sing.
I remember when that was. I remember that. Yeah, when he came.
Well, Susie came from New York to sing at that affair. Why, I don't know. But, she sang something. She had a beautiful voice, and I imagine she's probably dead now, because after all, my gosh, this was during the war.
Did you meet Sarah Gertrude Knott when she was here?
I met her, and
Wasn't she a pretty woman?
And
See, 10 years ago when Art and I were at Wolf Trap, she was there. Now, she was very elderly then, and she had a woman with her that was helping her now. But even then, she was a really attractive woman. Now, was it you or somebody told me, either you or somebody told me that Vance and also this Braxton Lungford had kind of, both of them had kind of a crush on her.
Yeah, I heard somebody told me.
Somebody told me that too. I don't remember who it was.
But Vance's crushes were kind of peculiar. They usually depended on whether the person is going to do him any good.
Yeah.
Like this gal who was head of the that Missouri Writers Project, and Vance had a kind of an Edwardian courtliness, you know. And he went up to St. Louis, and he told me about her daughter. She was from South Carolina, and about how her daughters curtsied to him, and he was greatly impressed by that, and so on. But this got Vance into trouble. Now, he flirted with May McCoy. Well, May took it seriously, and so he was. But she had all these ballads, and so she reeled them off to him, and so on. And Vance led her to believe that they were going to write a book with each other. And May and I had been friends, and I had known her for a long time. And in fact, she took me down to Galena the first time I ever went down there, I think. And, well, not the first time, but she took me down there one time. She and, that Mrs. Lyons, there were two sisters, and they were connected with that music company, Lyons Music Company. One was Bright, her name was Bright, and I guess the other was Lyons. And Edgar Lee Masters was down, Fanny Matthews, and we went to see him. Then, and Dewey Short had just come back from his trip to Europe, and oh boy, were they pouring on the butter. Dewey, you've just had everything now. What is there left for you? I said, have you been a father yet? I had just about had it by that time. And Jack Dillon was down there, and Jack motivated to come out. And we both sat on the front porch and laughed. And I said, honestly, they are just simply pouring a little straw. I couldn't take it anymore. It just come up, as I say, these things come up like a hiccup. But anyway, all of a sudden, May was mad as an hops at me and making oh my gosh, and that Bob Cochran sent me some quotations that they'd given these people who had that. I would still like to know what the heck that manuscript was.
Yeah.
And
he's coming to this meeting.
Bob is.
Yeah, he's going to chair a session or something.
And
we had some Arkansas people we wanted to.
Me too, of course, after that.
Oh, I don't think he's the kind that, I don't think he doesn't care. He's published, and all that. In fact, the last time I talked to him, which seemed a little odd to me, he said again, like he said to you too, I sure don't want to be remembered as the guy that only is the guy that wrote the biography of Vance Randolph. And I thought, well, what's wrong with that? Yeah, I don't see anything so bad about that.
Well,
but anyway, he's the folklorist at the University of Arkansas, and so we wanted to get representatives from Arkansas.
He's in the folklore.
Yeah, he's in the folklore, so he's going to chair a session. I'm glad he's coming. That's fine.
Well, the thing was about that book was he had the information, but he didn't get the person.
Well,
Vance never came alive in it. And Vance was especially in his younger days, a very interesting person.
Well, he was an interesting person to me in his older days,
And
he just fascinated me.
And when Vance laughed, he laughed all over, and he was a whale of a lot of fun to be around, which was why. And all these people that he seemed to think that nobody was holding guns on their head if they wanted to press checks in the hands. And I never, once he borrowed some money from me, and In return, he gave me an Indian idol, an Indian skull, a batch of books, this, that, and the other. And then I wrote a piece about it and got back more than the money as far as that's concerned. And
say, while I'm thinking about it, let me ask you something here. I think she's wrong, because I surely would have heard when I was talking to Sidney Robertson on the phone, Sidney Robertson Cowell.
why him they changed the camp meeting murders. He'd never heard of Brush Arbor murders, I guess, as far as that's concerned. And anyway, so of course, I couldn't afford a car, but I was down at Fanny Mathis's, and Fanny came to the door and said, "Leonard's car's out here, and they've come for Nancy." And Van said, "What for?" And I said, "I don't know." I went down, and one of the drivers is either Leather Standridge or there was a guy named David.
Leather Standridge. I've heard so many stories about him.
And they said, "Leonard sent us up here to drive you around, see if we can find a camp meeting a Brush Arbor visit." So we drove past Ponce de Leon, and somebody was loading groceries in there. And they yelled, "You need any help?" And "What you do?" And they said, "We're robbing the store." And they said, "You need any help? We're experts." And of course, they were bank robbers, but I didn't know
that
it.
old Greene County history, the first year, I mean, it's 1870 something. I think.
I've got the directory, Springfield. I've got the Springfield directory, which was the first thing I think published.
This was a Greene County.
1883 is the history of Greene County. That's the Goodspeed. I've got a copy of that.
Have you?
Yeah. I picked there's a sale out here where SMS is now. I went to one time and it was in a basket.
We had a history of Springfield, and it had our house in it.
Okay, there's then there's a Fairbanks and Tuck history of Greene County. That's set in 1917.
The Springfield by itself, little book.
That's the directory now, 1876.
Well, it had our house.
I've got a copy of that. It's in bad shape. It's kind of in pieces.
And we had a copy of it.
What would be the name? What would be the name?
I don't remember. It was just a history of the city.
Yeah, this was the first. This was a directory plus a history.
I only showed 3 pictures in this area, and one was our house, and then
they put out.
House next there
was there were a bunch of small ones came out too.
3 houses along there.
Springfield. Was this a long, narrow book?
No, it was about this high and thin. And the
all right, now right here. Now there's a Gazetteer of Greene County that's also 1876.
The Greene County Library.
It's called the Gazetteer. It's got a bunch of line drawings of houses in it. I've got one of those too.
Yeah, these are drawings. And
I've got one of those Gazetteers that remember they put out for all the counties. Put them out about between 1900 and 1915, say. You've seen them, those big books, and they've got all the subdivisions. They're all colored, and then they've always got either a photo. I've got one on St. Clair County too.
This was older.
Isn't that your county?
And I lived in St. Clair County, and
I thought St. Clair. Cedar County.
Cedar County.
I've got Cedar County too.
I've lived in Cedar and Vernon and St. Clair.
Yeah, I got Cedar and St. Clair.
Bates. We moved around a lot when I was a child. But
I'll look. What would be the name, or what would be the address on the thing, or where would it be? I'll look through those and see if I have it. I'll make you a copy of it. Do you have a copy?
I've got one. Only it's not original.
Yeah, you got a copy of it.
And then I've got the
well, you know, the Greene County Library had this history.
That's at Fairbanks and Tuck. The 2 volumes.
2 volumes. I've got those.
Yeah.
When they were over.
But I didn't have the original of that 1883.
They reprinted that.
Well, that's what I've got.
Yeah.
It's possible that history is over in the Shepherd Room, because the Greene County Library had when they were over in that brick house, that house on that Cox tore down, and Rogers, they bought
on Benton there, on
Rogers
Benton.
had it originally.
Yeah.
And it was over there, and it had only 3 houses on the north side were in it, and one was ours, and one was the one we was the second house from there. There was that brick house wasn't in there, and what was later the old missionary rest home for the Assembly of God, and it's been torn down for years. 2 of the houses are still alive, and B.B. Lightfoot had our old house. One of the students researched it, and the owner was over in Germany at one time. And I I'd like to have read what she finally came up with it. But, of course, we had it never occurred to me to read the abstract when we had the abstract.
Well, I'll look through there. What street would it have been on? The one you're talking about? Oh, you have a copy of it, though. You have a copy. Yeah.
I didn't have it. She had a
Yeah.
copy of the old house.
We had a copy of it,
Yeah.
but
When they lived down there, somebody probably left it there before they moved in.
I think that's
Yeah.
where we got it. I think it was there in the
Yeah.
attic when we
Yeah.
moved in. And
Well, if I ever get, I've got to have you
that
two over and
still
see
had
my
the
stuff.
old
If I
gas.
ever get it straightened up, it's awful
that
mess.
still has the old gas lighting and old
Yeah.
gas pipes in it and
Yeah.
everything.
Well,
And-
what I'm really running over my time here. See, that's trouble I get with you, and next thing you know, I'm sitting there talk, and we don't get out, I don't get home or anything else here and everything.
And it's like I'll always say on the rare occasions when I have to teach Sunday school, I always say any connection with what the lesson and what I'll have to say will be
Yeah.
really accidental. And I was teaching away at the end, and what was it, Fern? That's next week's lesson you're teaching, and I had to turn, had the page, read through the thing, and instead of turning back to the first of it, I just started on the next.
Well, do you like music, don't you? Do you like this kind of music in this part of the country, or?
Yeah, I like this.
Well, the old
He was
times.
talking
we used
about
to
we
have-
could go down there in the morning.
What I'm thinking, now let me tell you here, you might not be interested in these papers they'll be presenting. She will, I know that. But we're going to run music all day Friday in that Cummings Auditorium. We're going to have different acts going every 15 minutes. And I've got some people, I got a one-armed fiddler
Yeah.
from over at Stark City, Missouri, who's really good. I've got, you get a kick, the Galena Old Timers Band, which is a bunch of people that live around Galena. Oh, Asher, you know the name Asher down in there. Asher's Cane Bottoms and all that. And let's see, I can't think, but there's one old boy that these people are all in their 80s, I know. He's a fiddler. There's a woman fiddler. Then there's a woman. This guy's wife plays a guitar, and then this Ruth Asher plays a little keyboard. And then there's a big old tall. He must originally been about 6'4" or 5", and big old tall slender guy that plays the harmonica.
Yeah.
And they're a good group. They're really good. And then I've got a bunch of jig dancers and square dancers coming from over in Douglas and Ozark County.
Yeah.
And then we'll have, in our membership, we got all sorts of good musicians, fiddlers and hammer dulcimers and banjo and all.
Yeah.
So if you didn't, any of those sessions you didn't want to go to, you
Yeah.
could sit up there all day and hear nothing but music all day. So think about that, because I know, like this session of women now, that, like I say, there'll be May Candy McCord, is this one little girl's going to give it, and then Mary Elizabeth Mankey.
Died, but then Leslie, I guess.
Well, this girl has interviewed the other, either daughter, or is there another daughter or something?
Well, no, there was just Maudie.
All right,
There was Charles and Maudie.
But whoever
and
she
Leslie
interviewed couldn't tell her too
Leslie.
much about her grandmother. That's been grandmother or something.
Well, but Maudie
I don't know
had
who
a boy.
she said she interviewed. Well, all right, then that's who it was then, but she didn't get it. But, and then the other one is this friend of ours, Higgs was her maiden name. They're black, live over here. Audrey Higgs was her mother. Mona met her in Republican politics. One of your really high-class Hartville blacks, that lived in Springfield. And her daughter is now principal of Roundtree. Lofton is her name, Ferba Lofton. And she's going to give a talk then on this Mariah Watkins, who was the midwife and over there with Thomas Hart Benton's family, and more or less raised Thomas Hart Benton, and also right after the Civil War, when the slaves were freed, they for a brief time had a school for blacks over at Neosho, and George Washington Carver went to it, and he stayed with this Mariah Watkins. The Mountaineer did an article on her years and years ago. That's where I heard about her, and so this Ferba Lofton's going to do one on her. But there'll be some good things I think you'd be interested in.
There was a woman here that I interviewed when I was on the paper, and her granddaughter, I think, went out here to Hillcrest, and she was with Empress Carlotta down in Mexico.
Yeah.
And
that would be from Highlandville. Katie.
Yeah, Katie. What was
Oh, shoot, Katie. Her husband.
She managed.
They had the store, and he was also postmaster at Highlandville.
She was living here then. I interviewed her.
Yeah, I've got some articles on her at home. Yeah.
When I was on the paper.
Yeah, her husband was a member of Franz Joseph's band, his military band.
Well,
and they went to Canada, got out of the country when Maximilian was.
After Maximilian was.
Yeah, well, see, he came over from Austria with
Carolina
Maximilian.
went back to Europe to try to get some help for them.
Yep.
And of course she lost her mind.
Yeah, she went crazy. She lived in Belgium, I think, when she died or somewhere. But
She
then
died in
this
Belgium,
Katie, oh heck. Anyway, they went to Canada and then ended up down here at Highlandville. And there's still some relatives of hers. Yeah, she may have later on, but they had really done. But
she was here when I interviewed her, and some of her children were here, grandchildren, I guess they were.
Yeah, I'll be grandchildren now and everything. Well, I better get going here. I tell you, I sit over here and just yak away and everything. Well, I'm going to take these and copy them if I can then.
Huh? Read because she had made a batch of records, and I had some. And by golly, we loaned them to his brother, Ronald's brother, and I never got them back again.
I went by a flea market earlier today because Mona always, of course, the junkier the flea market, the better off I am because that's where I'll find my old 78s and my print sheet music and all that.
These were 78s.
Yeah, and there was a stack of these boxed records, 3 records per thing, 20 boxes, Longines, History of America or History of the World, something like that, a whole series with a book. And so there's 60 records, and I bought them for $20. Just got them, and somebody hadn't even been opened.
Yes, sir.
Now, since I'm into music, and the thing is, the reason I got them is there's a whole lot of folk stuff in there too, that of course complements what I already have. Anything I've collected from a fiddler, I try to. If I ever run on to a 78 that's that tune or a sheet music, I buy it to put in with my stuff. You know, I can't even read music. I don't know why I'm buying the stuff. It may not even be the same thing. Oh, I know the section that you'd be interested in too, and I'll bet you that 75% of the people I talk to, especially young people, but even people my age, don't know what shape note is.
Oh, my grandmother could sing with the shape note.
We're going to have a shape note session, and I went up last Saturday. We could go today. It's going to be the only Church of Christ is the only one keeping it going because they don't have any instrumental music, so they all sing.
I had a shape note songbook that Mama had, and I gave it to the library. I gave it when Edith Berg was up there.
Well, we're going to have
I don't know what happened.
this Dr. Oakley at Rolla, who's going to give a talk on the history of it and everything. But this guy is a singing school teacher, this Reverend Johnny Elmore at Lebanon, and went up last Saturday, and he had about 10 members. There's going to be about 15 people in the choir. He's bringing that part. He had to kind of go around and find people that could still sing it, you know, but there's some young ones in there. And what they're going to do then is after this guy, it's going to be in that Williams Chapel. It's going to be in the church.
Shape notes, they were all
fa sol la, do re mi fa sol la ti do.
Each one, instead of putting them up the musical scale, they just changed the shape.
Well, but they still go up the scale for themselves. Yeah, they still have a scale though.
Oh, do they?
Yeah. Well, that's in fact.
Some of them are square.
Some are half moon. Yeah, some are oblong. You know, and all. Yeah, they have all. But that'll be and it's going to be in that Williams Chapel.
What was the shape showed then whether they were quarter notes, half notes, or
well, the staff showed whether they were full or solid was one thing. See, I went to back in February. There's a young boy at Bonnie, Missouri, up there. Is the choir director at the Church of Christ at Bonnie, and he came over to Bolivar to teach that choir shape note. Well, the thing is, they all read music. And I was sitting next to an old boy with overalls on, just as country as he could be, and neither one of us don't know anything about music, and we just kind of look at each other every time they get off on all these musical terms. But this choir up there, and what they do is they'll go through and they'll sing the notes instead of the words. And
my grandfather.
Yeah, and he's also going to do a lot of the old singing school exercises that they used to, because you know singing schools were common in the Ozarks 80 years ago. Yeah, and so that'll be an instant session.
He had a tuning for it.
And I've got the
old. I'll tell you, despite that, they had the Sunday school for a while in the schoolhouse, and they had the dirty fight over who was going to lead the singing, Grandpa or Uncle Billy, Uncle Billy Elliott, and who wasn't really my uncle, but was somebody. You know, I had more. I didn't have any grandmothers, but I called 3 people grandpa.
Yeah.
And so. But Grandpa had the tuning for it, so he won out.
Oh, Lord. Well, I'd better get going. Oh, did you ever know anything about were you up around Stockton any? You didn't live up close to there too much, did you? That's Cedar County, isn't it?
Great-aunts lived there.
Did you know the Edge family? Did you know any of the Edges? I think Edge Supply down in here is part of that clan that came down here.
Didn't.
I got to find someday one of those. I came across some stuff I bought one time at a sale. Were a whole bunch of old Edge family documents, and I've got to get those to them someday. I've got to look up somebody.
I've got 2 histories of the.
But this was up at Stockton where I bought the stuff, and I think that family lived up in there.
I've got 2 histories of Cedar County. Yeah. And I used to, but now everybody I knew.
Oh well, yeah, it's all changed everywhere. It has,
But although there's a few people up there that I still know. But most of them are gone. But I had two aunts, great aunts, who were photographers up there for 63 years.
Yeah.
One of them lived to be 100 and the other lived to be 97.
Gosh.
And then one of my grandfather was county judge of Cedar County, and then he had a brother who was county judge of Cedar.
What was their name?
Huff.
Huff, yeah.
And then there were the Hoffs. Now, there's a house as you go into Stockton on what says East Avenue, but to me
Yeah.
it's South.
Yeah.
Why, you'll see a big two-story house on the one side, on the right.
Mhm.
You know that even the outer walls of that, the lumber in the outer walls of that is solid walnut.
Oh, well, that, you know,
And it's on
what
the
was the
National
name?
History
Fields?
of it.
Who was it owned all this land out where Fremont Hills and all that is? It was subdivided years ago, and I think the name was Fielder.
Fielder.
Maybe, I can't remember.
I'm not-
But he got in with Bob Hawkins, who was quite a character. He was a developer.
Yeah.
And I've got a picture in the paper that this would be back in the 60s. And there was an old 1840s homestead out there, two-story salt box type, you know, rectangular shaped, I mean. And it was
No, the
made of,
salt boxes
yeah,
are
no, this was just
Atlantic
the,
docks.
no, this was just the real slope, you know, just like most. And it was made of walnut, and they burned that thing to get it down. I got a picture of that, just well, kind of like they did the Roundtree home down here, you know.
There were two, the Old Tennessee Hotel, and that was John Smith's grandparents ran that. There were two of them historical houses, but they tore one down, but the Hoff house is still there.
Yeah, well, now they're a little more conscious after everything's gone. They get rid of it.
And,
Yeah. Listen, I've got to be going here. My goodness. Take a pause. I hadn't even been